some thoughts on 1 Samuel and chapter 29. David is in a fix. David has drifted into the most impossible situation. He is the anointed king. He is the one set to be the ruler over the nation of Israel. We've seen the terrible situation that the previous king, that Saul, had got in chapter 28, where he's got involved in necromancy and doing stuff that should never be done. And now we're with David. He should be the one coming forward, and yet he's in just the most... It's just outrageous, the situation he's in. He's on the side of the Philistines, set to fight against the Israelites. That's just incredible, isn't it, as we come into chapter 29. I think it's good to remember where this all started. It all started at the beginning of chapter 27, when David spoke to his heart. Just read what it says. David said in his heart, "Now I shall perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should escape to the land of the Philistines." Wow. And David, we can understand, he's exhausted from all of the threats of Saul, but he ends up in this terrible situation. So what happens is everything seems to be set up in chapter 29 for them to have this confrontation with the Israelites, and the Hebrews are there, this group, and David, his men, are in verse 2, were passing on the rear with Achish, in the rear with Achish, so they're there. The thing that changes it is these commanders of the Philistines. They're the ones who say, we can't have the Hebrews. They're about to turn it all around. And but Achish won't buy it. Achish wants David. Achish says, look at it in verse 3. Achish says, David's not done anything wrong. He's been with me for days and years, and since he deserted to me, I found no fault in him to this day. So he said, well, what's the problem? What's the problem? But the commanders of the Philistines are angry, and they continue. They say, send them back, because he's bound to turn so that he can get back with his own people. He's bound to turn against the Philistines so as he can take some of the Philistine booty, as it were, and go and even heads of the Philistines, and take them back, and then he would be accepted back with the Israelites. And then they say, is not this David? You remember, they all used to sing about David like this. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands, in verse 8. It says, and Achish says, well, always has nothing to say now. And so he says in verse 6, Achish, you've got to go back to David. You've got to go back. As the Lord lives, he says in verse 6, you have been honest to me, and it seems right that you march out. Nothing wrong from the day of your coming to me. But the commanders he's referring to, do not approve of you. So he sends him, he says, go back peaceably. But the remarkable thing is, David doesn't even buy it. David doesn't want to go. David says to Achish, what have I done wrong? Read it there in verse 8. What have you found in your servant from the day I entered your service until now, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my Lord, the king? He is calling his own people, he's calling his own people the enemies of the one he wants to submit to. It's all crazy, it's all complicated. And but Achish answers David and says, I know that you are blameless. You're like an angel of God. But the commanders of the Philistines, they says, you've got to go. You've got to go. You can't come up to battle with us. So he's sent back with the servants of David go with him, and he went back to the land of the Philistines. You see, He still hasn't got himself sorted out fully, has he, David? He's not going back to the land of Israel. He's going back to the Philistines. What do we make of this? It's just amazing, isn't it? But isn't there something of the sovereign workings of God for his people? David is out of fellowship with him. David is in a mess, but still God is watching over him and preserving him. It is an amazing thing how God works here through these commanders of the Philistines to make sure that David does not get into this terrible mess anymore. And we'll see how God works to move the situation forward, even into chapter 30. So that's some thoughts on 1 Samuel and chapter 29. Thanks.